are not, in fact, gun homicides or they are suicides. Now, that doesn't make it any better for society, whether you kill yourself with a firearm or some other horrible way. It doesn't make it any better, but it certainly skews the statistics, Joe, making it appear that a society is more violent when you're using a statistic called gun deaths rather than gun homicides in many cases, right, takes into account that many of these people took their own lives. Now, albeit horribly tragic, that is far different than someone shooting someone else. It's just categorically different. I think that's obvious. It's tautological. It's not, I'm not saying anything profound. But if we're going to have an open conversation about gun violence, I think it's important that you segregate out what are gun suicides from gun crimes and gun homicides. They are different. And that's not what a lot of these statistics do. So summing up, if you read the piece, you'll find out, number one, that they eliminate a lot of the countries where, quote, gun deaths, even though the statistic is skewed, and I just discussed that, and I'll get to it again in a second. But when you leave out countries where gun deaths are higher, of course you're going to get a number that shows the U.S. is this super violent country because you eliminated all the countries where the data shows that that's actually not the case. It's not complicated, Joe. This is very, if you want to do a study on people who are, say, obese and you eliminate all the obese people from the room, then the guy who's relatively average weight is going to look like the heaviest guy in the room and the obese guy. Do you get what I'm saying?
Sure do.
That's not how statistics works. I get some water here. Sorry, really thirsty today. The second thing, again, the gun deaths. The gun death statistic, it takes into account a lot of suicides, which, again, however tragic they are, it's not the same as talking about a gun homicide. Secondly, on this, or third, I should say, in the piece, which is interesting. But this is actually from a Wall Street Journal piece today, this statistic by, who is it? John Galston. I can't put it in the show notes because it's subscriber only, but he makes a point I've made over and over again. And I think it's an important one. Folks, I'm trying to be so delicate with this topic because I just, I'm afraid, I really, really would like, I'm desperately trying to get Democrats and liberals to listen here because I understand the emotions surrounding this, but I think it's an important topic. If your overall premise is that more guns equals more gun crime, more gun homicides, and a more violent society, Joe, don't you think you'd be able to show that? Yeah. That more guns have, in fact, I'm not trying to set you up, Joe. Don't you think like more guns would then, in fact, equal more crime, more gun homicides?
Yeah, I might think that, yeah.
It would be common sense. Mm-hmm. Well, as we've seen, the United States is not, in fact, the most violent country amongst developed countries in the world, as we just debunked that. But secondly, that's not the case, Joe. From 1993 to 2013, this is an important statistic. Remember this, folks. From 1993 to 2013, gun ownership in the United States, the amount of guns is increased by 50%. The number of guns increased by 50% from 93 to 2013. So according to the liberals' theory, their credo, their bedrock principle, then gun crime and gun homicide should have exploded.
Yeah.
They didn't, Joe. Gun homicides dropped by 50%. Listen to what I just told you. The number of guns has gone up by 50% from 93 to 2013. The number of gun homicides has gone down by 50%. Down. Your premise is not an accurate one. Your premise is simply not true. Your premise is entirely inaccurate. Now, I'm also going to include in the show notes an article, and I just tweeted it out if you'd be kind enough, again, to follow me on Twitter and spread the word. An article Kerry Pickett had tweeted out from last year, from March, but it's an Australian news article, Joe, about the surge in gun violence in Australia. Now, again, Australia, they instituted a gun confiscation program where you had to turn in your gun and the government would buy that gun back from you. It was mandatory. Folks, I already told you about the research between Australia and New Zealand where they found no discernible decrease in mass shooting incidents after the gun ban. I also told you about the American Medical Association study in Australia that showed there was no statistically relevant decline in gun homicides after the gun ban. I'm going to put an article in there from March of last year which shows that there's actually been a surge in many portions in Australia in crimes using firearms. So what I don't understand, again, is we've now debunked the idea, number one, that the U.S. is the most violent country amongst the developed world. Your question to your liberal friends is, well, why are you eliminating the countries in the, quote, developed world that have a higher gun homicide rate than the U.S.? Why are you doing that? Because when you include them, we're actually not even close to the top. Secondly, well, more guns means more crime. Actually, that's not accurate. More guns actually in the United States has meant less gun homicides. That's just the data.
Yep.
The data doesn't lie, and the data, as Ben Shapiro says, and I always say, facts don't care about your feelings. Finally, if your point is, well, Australia did a gun confiscation, gun ban, and look what happened there. Yeah, look what happened. Gun ownership, there's more guns in Australia now, by the way, than there were before the ban. Secondly, the research shown it had no discernible effect on either guns, homicides, or mass shootings. By the way, it's the American Medical Association for one of those studies, not a right-leaning outlet. And third, large portions of Australia, especially population centers, have seen surges in gun crime and gun violence. So your point, this is why I'm trying to tell you, folks, and why I'm so passionate about this and why I believe in what I'm doing. I'm simply trying to tell you what liberals are proposing has nothing to do with making you safer and has everything to do with an agenda. The agenda has always been to stop the individual ownership of firearms and the ability to defend yourself. And what's really incredible about it, Joe, is one more thing on this. I didn't want to spend, I have another number of things I want to get to, but the left does this a lot. They will make opposing arguments about things, and in making those opposing arguments, they'll miss their own hypocrisy. You know, an example I've given in the past often is public schools and healthcare. How the liberals, when you follow the money, why they make contradictory arguments makes sense. Liberals will say, you'll hear them often when it comes to public education, Joe, we're not spending enough money on the kids. We're not spending enough money on the kids. Yet when it comes to healthcare, by the way, even despite government spending, our healthcare system is still the best in the world, and our education system is one of the worst. They'll say, we're spending too much money. We're spending too much money on healthcare. Wait, what is it? In one case, public education, the system is failing. The system's failing. We rank towards the bottom of all the OECD countries in our education results and the results we produce on aptitude tests. Achievement tests. We rank that there's a big difference on achievement tests. We rank towards the bottom. Yet you're still insisting that the money obviously is not working. Yet we are spending money in our healthcare system. Believe me, I'm not saying we don't have significant problems in our healthcare system. I've done entire shows on that. I'm simply saying where there's still a significant private market, free market component to it, it's actually working, and you're saying we're spending too much. It doesn't make sense. Now, why? Why do they make two different arguments? In one case, we're spending too little. In one case, we're spending too much, despite the fact that the results are completely different. They make two different arguments because the public education system, the money that goes into the public education system through taxpayers, finds its way into basically what's become, in some cases, a jobs program for people who vote Democrat. You've seen a bloat in administration where taxpayer dollars go in the education system. And you've also seen a lot of money wind up in the hands of teachers unions that just by the percentages overwhelmingly vote Democrat. Yeah. So the money, you need to keep the money flowing to keep the teachers unions happy. I'm not blaming teachers. Don't email me that. Teachers are great. I'm talking about the organized interests that don't represent, I think, what teachers really stand for, in my opinion. But do you see how that money eventually benefits Democrats? Yeah. Well, what happens in the healthcare system? The money, the end result of that money is not, in fact, teachers unions. It's typically hospitals, doctors, nurses, and, it's probably 50-50. Half of them are probably Democrats, half of them are Republicans. In short, it does not exclusively benefit the Democrat Party, so the argument is always, we spend too much, because it doesn't benefit them. But Democrats never see the irony there, because they don't want to see the irony there. I should say liberals. But you see the same thing, Joe, when it comes to the firearm issue. They will make an argument about abortion, right? And when you turn the argument on them about firearms, they simply have nothing to say. Mm-hmm. They'll say something like, well, on abortion, if we were to make abortion, illegal, say even after 20 weeks, then women are just going to go in the back alley and do have an illegal abortion, which would be dangerous. So the premise of what you're saying, just to be clear, on the and I'm not. This is what liberals are saying. I am saying laws matter. I just want to be clear on this. The liberals say laws don't matter, right, Joe? Mm-hmm. In other words, you pass a law on abortion, and of course, what's going to happen is women are just going to circumvent the law and have an abortion anyway, and it's going to put them in danger. So therefore, why pass the law? So, Joe, I'm not crazy, right? Laws don't matter,
right?
But yet, when it comes to firearms, despite the evidence that the laws do not work, the assault weapons ban, the Department of Justice's own sponsored study, the assault weapons ban did not work. The Australian gun ban, as I've told you now for 2 shows now, did not work. Evidence mounting that increased gun ownership does not lead to increased crime rates, despite the fact that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that your statements and your premise about reduced gun ownership, increasing your personal safety are irrelevant. You're asking for more laws, despite the fact on abortion that you're making the argument that laws don't work. Laws do work. And by the way, we don't have unfettered access to guns. We have a background check system. We have a NICS system. We have a prevention device from dangerous felons buying weapons. It's illegal currently to do straw purchases. In other words, Joe, I can't buy a gun for you and give it to you. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. This is all illegal. So don't tell me we have unfettered access to guns. The conservative point is laws do work. We have reasonable laws in place and regulations in place to prevent criminals and people who are going to prey on us from accessing dangerous weapons. We already have those. But what you want is more laws. Just to be clear, Joe, to sum this up, liberals are arguing for more laws that we've produced evidence will do nothing because the evidence is already there, right, despite the fact that on abortion, you're making the opposite case that laws don't do anything at all. Do you understand, why I wake up every morning frustrated about, I love my country. I'm a patriot. This is the greatest place on earth, and I'm happy to be alive at this time. I thank God every day for the gifts and opportunities he's put in front of me. But it is frustrating being a conservative because when you turn that to liberals and you ask them that question, they stutter and stammer because they have nothing to say. Because, folks, to them, it's not about reason, and it's about strictly emotion. They play on people's emotions to enact an agenda, and that agenda is the diminution, the decreasing of individual liberty at the expense of individual liberty and benefiting entrenched state power interests. That's always what this has been about. It's been that from the start. And when you point out the hypocrisy of it, they either ignore it or they just move on to the next argument. But that's another argument to bring up to your friends. Well, then if laws are going to stop gun violence, and what's your argument about abortion? Do you think we could reduce the abortion rate in the country if we say made abortion illegal after 20 weeks? No, we can't do that. Women will get abortions anyway. Well, you just said that gun laws will stop gun violence. Meanwhile, there's no evidence of that. It's nonsense. They make different arguments all the time, which is just it's very upsetting. All right. What else? I got so much. Okay, a couple more things here. All right. Today's show finally brought to you by our buddies at Brick House Nutrition. They're one of our original sponsors. Folks, Field agrees that product sold like crazy. So they had a really big, huge rush of orders. It's been very popular. So Miles has been very good in finally getting that the Field of Greens product. The orders were a bit overwhelming. So yeah, but they have some great stuff over there at Brick House Nutrition. My favorite product is Foundation. Foundation it's a creatine ATP blend. Now, folks, I know a lot of you have heard about creatine in the past. It's interesting though. It's one of the most effective muscle building compounds ever devised. I remember when creatine first came out and people were just crazy about this stuff. The effects are amazing. But for some reason, it kind of died off in popularity. Well, these guys over at Brick House who have they work in conjunction with one of the doctors on their team there, designed a creatine ATP blend, which really makes the creatine even that much more effective. It's a great product. It's called Foundation. It's available at brickhousenutrition.com/Dan. That's brickhousenutrition.com/Dan. This is a true story. I'm not making this up, by the way. I always encourage people, if you're going to try this product, take the mirror test, right? Because it takes about 7 days to load into your system. But look at yourself in the mirror and then look at yourself in the mirror 7 days later. It looks like you added some serious muscle. It's a great, right, Joe? The little Joe loves it, doesn't he? So I would, folks, I'm not spinning your wheels. Okay, so I have this nephew, and he comes up for Thanksgiving, and I gave it to him, and because Miles sends me a lot of the stuff, and I say, hey, take a bottle. It's really good stuff. And he just started working out. He's like, Uncle Dan, you think I can drive up and get some more of that stuff? He's in Fort Lauderdale. He's like 100 miles away. I'm like, dude, I'll just pay to send it down to you. I'm like, you don't have to try. That's how good it is. So go check it out. BrickhouseNutrition.com/Dan. Check out Dan, excuse me, Foundation. It's a